Hello and welcome to this week's episode of A Bazaar podcast. As per usual, you can find us both on YouTube, but also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as via RSS feed for your podcast listening app of choice. I am first of your hosts, MetallFenix, and I am joined by my two co-hosts, starting with Sixten.
Yes, I'm Sixten. I'm one of the co-hosts.
And we have Walter as well.
This is Library Walter.
And finally, joining us today is the guest of the week, ProggerPlays. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell the audience a bit about who you are?
Hello, I am Progger or ProggerPlays, as my channel is called. I am a longtime enjoyer of card games in general, and I'm just super happy to be here.
Well, awesome. We can go straight into what have you been playing this week? And we usually start off with the guest, so why don't you get right into it?
I would like to say I've been doing a variety of things, but we'll say it's 95% dually. I am obsessed with our little friend, trying to get him to work, and particularly obsessed with trying to get Armored Core up and over the top.
There you go. And Walter, what have you been getting up to?
I've been playing mostly Mac and a little bit of Pig. I'm trying, Mac. I'm still enjoying him. I'm really like taking the time to treasure the games where you get to do something other than Poppy Field or Femur. Like I think his most fun lines are his hardest to get into, which is not that they're like bad or I guess the other fun thing that I like is like crit runic blade stuff. Like that's a pretty fun line as well, like the multiple letter openers and the hit you for 90,000.
Yeah.
But mostly his fun stuff, if you get to do it, is kind of revolves it doesn't revolve around library, but it's dependent on library to be competitive. So like most of the cool like stuff you could do with scales or secret plans or like any of the kind of his non-weapon endgame is all very library dependent. So like when you play Mac, you just gotta savor your library games. You know what I mean? Like when you get to do the fun stuff, you just gotta really enjoy it, really lean into it. Because he's super fun when you're not playing Femur. You know what I mean? I mean, I do enjoy Poppy
Yeah.
Field too, but he's super fun when you're not playing Femur as well. Say Femur is really a snooze fest, both to play and play against. So
And what about
yeah,
you,
that's what I've been
Sixten?
up to.
What have you been getting up to?
I've been playing Vanessa with the new items, and my main discoveries this week, or well, it's not my own per se, it's partly thanks to Ragnar especially. He opened up my eyes to the power of proboscis. Well, I already probably mentioned last week that I'm a big fan of playing proboscis, but now I'm almost forcing it every game if I am allowed to. I've also been really impressed by the new item called Saloon, Sea Dog Saloon.
Yeah.
I think that item is strong enough that if you find it and get the gold upgrade on 7, it can absolutely carry you to 10 wins with a variety of friends. It's just that strong on its own. It's kind of at first I thought it would be underwhelming in the later days, but actually you can, with like a figurehead or CDR, and of course the upgrades themselves also have flat cooldown reduction, get it to a point where you start at like 3 to 4. It depends on if you have haste solved, like hasting it, but it's surprisingly fast and efficient. And then I've also been experimenting a bit with what is it called, the Orange Julian in the last like 2 days or so,
Yeah.
because there have been people telling me that I'm underrating that item. I have still
Yeah,
not been
both of
able
you
to
guys told
make
me
it.
it was terrible last week. By the way, just
Yes,
saying.
so my verdict is it is still terrible unless you specifically get it and sniper rifle before day 4. If the stars align and you get both of those and you win the early days, then it's fine. But it's such a, how should I put it? It relies so heavily on finding it early and finding a very specific different item early as well, that I think in practice it is an item that is a very niche, I would say. I'll call it a niche item. I wouldn't call it anymore like the worst Vanessa item in the game, but it's definitely niche. I'm curious if you, Metal, have tried any
So for
Julian
me,
games.
I think the biggest thing is right now, at least with how I've been. So for context, I've also primarily played Vanessa still, and I think right now I'm not a huge fan of going into single weapon lines. I find myself partially kind of limited when I get into single weapon. Um, since none of the cards from either of the latest two expansions, bar maybe like dive weights, really cooperate that nicely with trying to go for like a crow's nest strategy or something like that. And this just leads to a scenario where I'm usually not trying to pick up those specific pieces like the crow's nest, which means that I'm already kind of distant from wanting to play, flagship or sniper, which are the things that I'd imagine that Julian might, in theory, work with. So that's been the main reason where I feel like just raw on paper, it doesn't really make sense to hedge a card with high investment cost if it's not in the direction that you typically want to be going to begin with.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. It when you buy Julian and you want to make him good, you are actively opting out of strategies that are stronger currently. Like Orange Julian is mutually exclusive, or well, close to mutually exclusive with a lot of Vanessa's, in my opinion, strongest builds. Which means that I'm committing all these resources into what I consider at best to be a B tier or C tier strategy. So it's not just that Orange Julian himself is a bad item, it is that he promotes playing strategies that have no overlap with what I consider to be Vanessa's best
yeah,
builds
I
currently.
think
So that's
I
also the
I
problem.
do also think like single weapon Vanessa remains a very powerful strategy. If that's the angle you want to take the character, especially if you want to play either wide weapon or single weapon, there's a lot of convergence from those paths to where you can pretty reliably hit one of the two boards, especially if you are very open to playing things like the traditional trebuchet board or the traditional crow's nest boards or the traditional ammo into keg boards. But for me personally, a lot of it just comes down to I've always had a strong bias towards Vanessa's more aquatic side of things, mainly because that playstyle lends itself a lot more to you being able to go for, I'd say, more creative boards. The main thing about Crow's Nest is the Crow's Nest plus the weapon is typically expected to take up half, if not more, of your board if you're running it with, say, a medium weapon. And when you already have half your board taken up, and then you're probably supposed to have a silencer, now it's 60% of your board taken up, and the remaining 4 slots are probably supposed to be some sort of utility. After a while, for me, it started feeling a little bit like using one crow's nest board, using all the crow's nest boards. I think it's very similar. It's the reason I started playing less Mac due to how frequently it felt like everything just converged into Femur. And even though I've played Femur, with a ton of different supporting items on the remaining 7 slots, because Femur has such an overpowering presence in terms of the identity of the build, it always ends up feeling just a little bit like every Femur board is the same board.
Yeah, I mean, they all have incense too, right? And probably smelling salts. Like, like even you're saying like, oh, all the crow's nest boards are the same. Well, I mean, like at least 50% of the femur boards are all the same too, right? Incense is a must
Yeah.
include. Smelling salts in your incense is a must include, and probably there's an amber or a runic You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Then that's
at
kind of the
most
thing
there's
that
like
I
2 to 3
do.
slots to where you could
Yeah.
get creative. Basically, it's
I
not.
feel like
It's still pretty
the
restricted.
aquatic boards are more like adjacent to stuff like Poppyfield or what have you, in the sense that Poppyfield poses a relatively broad requirement of you probably want to have weapons on your board, the same way that aquatic boards tend to pose relatively broad requirements of you might want your cards to say aquatic on them, but even that is like a loose
Yeah, I mean
requirement.
the nice thing about Poppy Field is that like you make cool use of enchants, you make cool use of off hero items, which is fun. I mean, I guess like femur you can get marbles, I guess, but there isn't like a huge amount. I mean,
Yeah,
you can get
and the
like
main
dock
thing
lines, but
is
that
like,
isn't even that good. It's like
and it
it's
doesn't
like pretty mid.
feel very different. Like even
No, it's
if
just
I
a different
have
slow item.
marbles,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
the feeling is the same. But
yeah.
whenever just having a Uzi on a Poppyfield board, honestly, like it adds some flair, some spice. You're suddenly
Well, I mean,
faster,
it's
but
also like, yeah, it makes you like appreciably faster, which is big. Like, I had drill on my
Mhm.
Poppy Field board today on Mac. Like, that was fun. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, whatever. Probably think I'm a pretty
And
bad person for that one, but what?
Before I forget, I
mhm.
just want to give two more shoutouts. Eels is a really fun item. It is only strong if the stars align, but I have had multiple 10 wins this week with electric eels. If I find some way to give it lifesteal or shield, especially if how should I put it? You also kind of, and this I talked with Metal privately about this, you kind of also need to be a bit lucky with your matchups with electric eels
Yeah.
because it is a kind of polarizing item inherently. But anyway, electric eels is a ton of fun. And the other thing is silencer proboscis. I am for real. I have
Yeah,
had
yeah,
now
yeah.
3 games where I have either a gold silencer or a diamond silencer on my proboscis final board. And the reason for this is that usually with proboscis these days on Vanessa, the hardest thing to solve is not the slow procs. It's actually the base damage on your
Yeah.
proboscis, which is weird because in the past it's always been the other way around. It's super hard to get slow procs, but you always have some way to scale it. But the solution sometimes can be simply buying that stupid silencer and
Well,
slamming it on the board for the
so I
damage, which is
think
so funny to me.
the main thing to identify when it comes to that, and I've been also playing a ton of Proboscis, um, is the fact that Proboscis is a board that relies around leveraging speed, which is already one of Vanessa's core strengths. You can get really quick starts onto your shot glasses and then have them go very quickly. Or I've even seen great players like Ragnar get wins where they didn't even have shot glasses, they just played an assortment of things that slowed with the proboscis. And the key thing about Silencer isn't that it's the only thing that Vanessa has that gives damage onto an item. It's the fact that it provides its full benefit instantly at start of combat, compared to other options you could get, like Honing Steel, for example, which suffer the issue of you'll have already had your shot glasses trigger once or maybe even twice by the time you get your first damage buff, and you're not trying to go for a scaling strategy, you're trying to rush people down effectively.
I
And
mean, do you
that's
think the
why
whole
Silencer makes a lot of
package
sense.
of like proboscis, multiple clamoras, like these kind of boards, like I feel like they're some of the absolute strongest endgame boards. Um,
I agree.
they
They are one of the like of course you have to solve the problems, but if you have solved the problems it is extremely hard to answer a proboscis board because proboscis is of course a passive item and clamora is start of game. So if you can find some way to solve the upfront damage, you kind of have almost an like it is approaching OTK levels in
Yeah, and it's
practice.
impossible to interact with too. Like that, I think
Yep.
that's like to me, it's like even it's like I would prefer if Clamora or something was like a one. Like it's so weird that they took every single start of combat effect out, and then they like left one of the strongest ones as as a multiple target trigger, and that's what's so weird to me is like
Well, so
a
I
lot of the
don't
stuff they
think
took.
I don't think Clamora is particularly impactful in a proboscis build, because the issue is that
Really, this card is
no,
unbelievable.
realistically, you are rarely getting your proboscis over like 150 damage or something, which means that the Clamra is only providing like 400 damage, whereas your shot glasses are providing 4,000. So the
Yeah,
fact
but like,
that
usually
but they have like 4
you have
Clamoras in
skills.
play and
no,
and the shipwreck,
simply
and I just
on
die.
average, you do not have more than one Clamra at most, and oftentimes it's not an item I prioritize on those boards. It's
So
much
for
more
me,
important to leverage like
the
holsters.
Clamra, if it's in the late game, like Walter describes, the Clamra is not just for the slows, for the proboscis. I usually have either some kind of skill, like a charging skill, or I have a, some kind of other item that cares about slow procs, right? So it's usually the Clamra is also a way for me to kickstart other
Right, so
items.
that's
Not
kind
always,
of what I
but
mean, right? Is that like Clamra is a really important item for Vanessa currently, but the boards that it matters the most for is going to be Keg, Elemental Depth Charge, or Anglerfish Lighthouse, not Proboscis. And sometimes there can be overlap, but my main point is that having that instant trigger only matters if triggering instantly starts looping something else, which is hard to do in Proboscis because you can't get that item itself to loop. Whereas when it comes to Elemental Depth
well,
Charge,
you
for
can have
I
like
mean,
example,
you can have like turbo
you can have
proboscis and
enchant,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, like honestly, even if you have like toxic proboscis, like that's probably can start a lot of loops because you can have skills that then interact with like
oh,
what
but
you
that's kind of the
poison.
point of that build is that you don't care about starting a loop because you're playing a ball of smalls with holsters. You already have perma haste until the fight is over. Because
Well, I'm not
yeah.
saying you do or don't care about starting a loop. I'm saying that you trigger proboscis 30 times at the start of the fight and apply, whatever 600
Yeah, right.
poison or
But
something.
that's
Like,
the point, right? Clamra is like 3 of those 30 procs, so it's not very relevant to that build.
yeah, I guess I just fundamentally disagree. I think obviously like holsters is crazy too, but I actually think Clamora is a big problem card, and like I think that as the game has continued, basically like as there's fewer and fewer start of combat things, the ones that remain become all the more powerful.
No, so that's what I'm saying. I completely agree. You just have it pegged wrong in terms of which builds it's good in.
So
Like
Progger, do you have any
I think
opinions on Clam?
especially I'm gonna point out Clamra is very frequently underrated in keg builds because keg can use quick ignition to terrifying extent with lighter as soon as you have the Clamra to just or slow burn. It doesn't really matter. The point is that build to get 1 or 2 additional burn triggers on like second 0, it can be like 2 or 3 seconds faster on your keg, which is a tremendous amount since it's already usually going off at like 5 or 6 seconds. And even more so in Elemental Depth Charge, because if you have Creeping Toxins or Slow Burn with Clamra, and then you have Figurehead and Sick Burn, you can make the Depth Charge loop effectively infinitely for as long as it has ammo. Which at that point, the freeze disruption part of it starts really being incredibly meaningful. And so I think in terms of like, if you really want to abuse Clamra, look for anything that can use slow burn or creeping toxins to a very meaningful degree, and you're looking in the right place.
All right. So Progger, do you have anything to add? Just
I
in
I
general.
was going to add something humorous.
Yeah.
Being on the receiving end of those late game builds, I would
Mhm.
agree with everything that was just said. It is very, very frustrating to play against a well-built Probo board. So
Yeah. I
I've
always
fallen victim.
tell people on stream that I'm kind of more afraid of late game Vanessa than late game Pig, because even if late game Pig on average might be most of Pig's boards scale well into the late game, and a lot of Vanessa's don't. But the only boards that can like wipe me off the face of the planet is especially anything with meaningful like insta-start Clamras, because they can beat even holster boards since they just slow you down and then have something that's somehow even faster.
Yeah, that's something
Terrible.
frequently people don't even talk about. The Clamora still also slows the opponent at start of the game. It's not just about what you're doing for yourself. You're also start of game reverse rigging your opponent, which is of course quite strong as well.
Especially
in the
for
late game.
those like looping builds that have something very specific they do that will end the fight quite quickly.
Nothing like getting a slow on Aiden.
All right, so Progger, I just wanted to ask, beyond Armored Core, because you said you were trying to make it work, what on Dooley have you had the most success with? Because you never really mentioned, like, what do you think is the core for you that you feel most confident in piloting to 10 wins currently?
Currently, I would say the core is the one that I end up finding we'll say the most paths to success. I typically I'll go with it. There's not a lot to it. I don't want to say it's brain dead, but the fact that we can find so many different paths to make the core just become its own condition, which I've only had, we'll say, a sparing number of times where I've got it to actually become my win condition. It works. I find this may have something to do with the fact that I particularly favor tech builds, and I'm not going down the railgun path. I'm more going down the fact that I am in love with cybersecurity. That's probably my most favorite and most successful. As we were talking about this earlier, the only issue I see with cybersecurity and the core is you have to have at least mid-range high roll luck, because you want to get cybersecurity relatively early. He's useless at silver. This may unsettle some people. I would say even at gold, he's not great.
I agree.
Diamond is pretty much the only acceptable answer. And the other thing that I want to couple with that is you need to be playing for tempo, because I don't feel that even the perfect cybersecurity build has the legs to go much past, we'll say, day 14.
Well, you just run out of damage, right? Like, even if you have Obsidian 100% crit cybersecurity, it still only does 8,000, and they just
scaling
have more
options
HP than
are
that.
And scaling options for damage are so few and far between.
I think that would be my main, like, if there's a Dooley rework beyond just making his items good. I think that what he's lacking to be competitive currently is late game scaling options that aren't capped. So, cybersecurity, even to some extent force field, unlike like, for example, Pygmalion or Mac that have, let's not call it exponential scaling, that is slightly inaccurate, but they at least have this kind of scaling that can get out of hand. Whereas Dooley currently, just unless you find like a shatter or something, it's very hard for Dooley to reach that threshold where the scaling just works, right? Like, you don't have to worry about, oh, what if my opponent has 500 more health, then I can't kill them.
Right.
So I think that is probably Dooley's primary weakness in the late game currently, is how do I solve this inherent scaling weakness that Dooley has currently, and I think that's why you have to play for tempo currently, like as you say, you have to play for tempo.
Was actually the perfect segue into the topic of the week, because we had been meaning to talk about the concept of leveraging the skills or leveraging the strengths of your playstyle in order to create kind of playstyle diversity in the Bazaar. And I'll go into kind of a bit of an explanation on my perspective of it. but I thought this time it's actually a really great opportunity for Progger to get to kind of lean into this segment by explaining a little bit more in detail what are your thoughts then on why do you need to play for tempo in order to make cybersecurity a viable play style? What are the strengths that you're leveraging and the weaknesses that you're mitigating for people who might not quite be familiar with this yet?
That's a great point to bring up, and I'm happy to carry on with this topic. It's one of my love and hates about Dooley. I I going like we'll go macro on this. The type of player that I am, despite my we'll say the way I talk, and you know, I've been described as chill. Tempo is something that I've pursued often, despite the fact that I've mainly been a control player most of my life. Because I appreciate what tempo does in terms of always putting your opponent on their heels. Now, we don't have the luxury of a live opponent, so we're not quote unquote putting anyone on their heels, but you are playing someone. So I think because of where Dooley is, and because of the nature of what the cores don't have right now, is we're always forced into a tempo. You want to win like all of your PvPs. You want to high roll on the the path, the mountain path. You want to high roll into the PvE fights. You want, like, XP is king. I think more so for Dooley than any other hero. Like, I would agree it's important for every hero, but it's especially important because, especially if we're going down the cybersecurity route, you want to kill fast, early, and like get your 10 wins as quickly as possible, because it has no ability to hold up past day 14. Like, when I'm always hedging in my stash with cybersecurity for the pivot over to Dualtron, or the pivot over to just an insane drill build. Like, there's things I will keep back because me personally, I don't find any I don't run into many economy issues with Dooley, and that may have something to do with my playstyle or what we know about the shops and where we go. But yeah, in short, tempo is king for Dooley, more now than it ever has been. And I kind of liken the playstyle somewhat similar, and I don't know if people agree with me, but somewhat similar to what we have to do with Vanessa, where you're trying to really push a lot of damage quickly. Contrary to what I was talking about before with Armored Core, that is 180 degrees away from the tempo. What you're trying to do is basically sustain until your opponent either dies by sandstorm or dies by poison or fire or whatever you're trying to lay down. So I hope that offers a little bit of insight into how my brain works on that.
Yeah, I think the Vanessa comparison is apt, especially because I would make the argument personally that at least at this point in time, Vanessa is a relatively low synergy hero. And what happens then is if you're not focusing on like a specific combo, you don't have this, say, Blue Bug with Robotics Factory, for example, and Keg is an exception, but it's kind of Vanessa's only really combo-centric build currently. You end up in a scenario where builds that require less specific pieces tend to be strong much sooner than builds that require specific pieces, because obviously you can put whatever you have on your board and have it be relatively strong. but at the same time, they hit their ceiling faster than builds that do have really powerful combos, which means that you do care about leveraging tempo. But I do think it's also a good thing for people to understand that you can play very differently depending on if you're trying to go for early tempo or tempo in the middle. Right now,
Yep.
I do income start on Vanessa, and I have a full video breakdown on like all of the motivations for that and all that stuff. But in the past, I would play gold skill on Vanessa. And it just depends on what stage of the game are you trying to leverage. On days 1 through 3, when your board space is exceptionally limited and you've had few opportunities to pick up additional like items, even if you're going to all of your shops, skill is kind of invaluable, and even to a degree an enchanted item, because they both serve the function of kind of letting you have multiple things in the same slot. And on a 4-slot board, having effectively a 5th or 6th slot in terms of, let's say we look at katana or double barrel with a left or right handed, it really is equivalent to a person who doesn't have that being able to play like 3 extra double barrels or something. And
I would
of
agree.
course, really early, that's a huge impact. But at the same time, when you're going for something like what you can also do currently on Vanessa, like what Sixten described, the fact that there are so many builds that can leverage shot glasses. You can do things with Sea Dog Saloon. I've had great success with Elemental Depth Charge. The ability to be able to reliably spike these things in the mid game by having the money to pick up all of your potential hedges and upgrades is also a form of playing for tempo, but we're choosing which days we want to prioritize, which is what I would call trying to play to the strength of your play style, which means that if someone tries to play Vanessa the way I do currently with skills, then they might have a tough time. Whereas someone who plays heavily for tempo on days 1 to 3 and try going for my income start might also have a tough time, because that's the golden opportunity to leverage that skill start that they were going for previously. And on the topic of gold skills, I think no one advocates for it more than Walter over here in the corner. So I think you could also give your perspective on how do you think it influences the way that you play Mac to choose that particular star?
Well, I mean, it's definitely hugely influential. Like, I think that there's two, like the logic of gold skill start. I think there's two things going on. One is that it's like, I don't know if any of you have played League of Legends. It's like, if I take Ignite and my opponent doesn't take Ignite, maybe I can win a losing matchup.
Yep.
And then it's like, if we both take Ignite, then it's like back to what it was if neither of us had taken Ignite. And gold still kind of works in a similar fashion on days 1 and 2. Like, normally Mac loses to Vanessa, like in the like a random Mac board is on average losing to a random Vanessa board on day 1 if we took like the full population of players. But Mac board with the gold skill is beating non-gold skill Vanessa on average also. So I think that there's that aspect of it where it's like, by taking the skill, you're kind of grabbing on to your agency in the game right away. You're saying, I want to be as strong as possible as soon as possible. And that's one aspect to it, right? The other aspect to it is this idea of like, a win's a win. Like a win on day 1 is worth the same as a win on day 10. Um, and the wins on day 1 are quote unquote easier to get. Now, that's that's a nebulous concept, and about whether it's easier, it like depends on what hero you're playing, whatever. Like,
Mhm.
so we can move past that part of it for a second, but just the philosophy of like, well, if I click skill and I'm collecting 2 or 3 wins in my first 3 days in a very high percentage of games, like I would say like on gold skill Mac, I would say that I win at least 2 out of 3 of my first days in at least 80% of my games. So so that means that like you've taken the agency of the game and you've kind of front loaded it, and then with that kind quote unquote lead, as in a lead and wins over the amount your hero would have on average had you not taken gold skill, you can then play out the rest of your game plan, and you can do it from a position of knowing that whatever build you end up on doesn't necessarily need to make it to day 15. And that's kind of like, it's a different kind of pivoting, or pivoting is the wrong word for it, but it's a different way of leaving yourself open. So you're leaving yourself open not to necessarily go for the best build, but to go for more possible builds by virtue of the fact that the builds you go for do not need to be as strong in order to potentially get you to 10 wins.
I think there's a specific card on Mac that's the perfect example of the kind of thing that you're talking about, which is, I always think of Frozen Flame. Because Frozen Flame as an item is something that, since it basically has the skill Gorgon's Gaze built into it, it means that for every portion of the game that people have to hit you with damage in order to win, that item is going to be really, really powerful. But then at some point towards the later portion of the game, where it becomes more and more common that people will either run one-shots or combos, like, an instant charging depth charge, or some kind of, you can still do like
Or you
library
just die to
retool
burn and poison while all
calcinator
their
stuff, like,
items are
yeah,
frozen.
exactly. That item falls off really steeply, which means that if you are already, let's say best case scenario, you might be 4-0 on day 5, and you find that just before your level 7 upgrade, spiking that when you know for a fact I only need 6 more runs to walk this one all the way to the bank, feels really good. And if you're in the most stark opposite scenario, like you're 0-4, I would definitely be in the mindset of like, I'm gonna need to doom roll for Femur, because otherwise I don't think I'm getting 10 wins from this spot.
Yeah, and I don't
So-
even think I think if you're 0-4, by the way, I don't even think Femur gets you to 10. Like
No.
I actually think Femur falls off even harder than
I've
Poppy Field.
gotten
So-
that comeback multiple
I mean,
times.
you
with
can,
Femur,
right? You
so
can,
it's
but
like, for
but
me
like
at least,
0-4 is
my...
disastrous on Mac. It's really hard to
Yeah,
get to 10.
0-4 on Mac is tough. It's a little bit
You need
less.
to
I would
highlight
just-
pretty hard.
Yeah.
like to
Sixten?
add that, and Metal kind of discussed it, that Hero's playstyle sort of comes down to its item pool, and specifically what type of items you have. And I'm going to use the most polarizing example, which was back in the December patch when Dooley was the strongest hero. His 2 best cores / builds were Ignition Core, as well as Companion Core with Monitor Lizard. And these 2 were completely different playstyles. So Ignition Core, the way you play that build with the race, Omega Ray, was pure tempo. Basically, you just played to win every single day. So you played, you took temp boost, you went for fights, you just grabbed items, you could go with skill start, etc., etc. It was like basically like Progger currently describes playing dually, just play for tempo. Whereas when you click Companion Core and went for Monitor Lizard, instead of playing for tempo, what I and many other top legend players did was we hard forced the monitor lizard and the gamma ray. So we went to every single shop that could feasibly have a monitor lizard, and we reroll. We might lose day 1. We're gonna reroll. We're gonna sell everything. Same on day 2, day 3. So instead of playing for tempo, we play this opposite way of we're fine with losing the early game because we know that if we find the monitor lizard, we have an item that is capable of once you have assembled the so-called Exodia, you will no longer lose a fight essentially. So I think
And again,
this kind of
I do think I
Sure.
just want to interject a very important clarification there. Is what we mean when we're saying we're not playing for tempo is that we mean we're not playing for tempo on the day, because you are still playing for a tempo spike when you find the item that you're looking for. So it basically means that if you have a good understanding of what you want to accomplish with your playstyle, it means that you can accurately gauge whether it's more beneficial to claim tempo now or to defer it for a tempo spike later. And I think
Yes. So what I was going to say is if a hero has items or a build that says if you assemble this combination, you win the game in practice. So this is, for example, a few Pygmalion builds are like this. A few, like Bug Dually, for example, in the past was kind of like this. If you assembled all the bugs and the robotics factory, you just win the game. That is why I went income and just went to every single shop that could have the bugs. Like just I skip Mountain Pass for bugs. I skipped chocolate bars sometimes for Andy. Like I didn't care about winning day 2 because I know that if I just assemble the bugs, I win the game. So that is kind of for me the primary. If a hero has items that say win the game if you assemble me, that means that I will forfeit tempo and just play for hitting the items. And I think Pygmalion is probably the hero that has had the Pygmalion throughout the history of the Bazaar is the hero that has played the least for tempo in the early game,
so this
because he has those kind of
I have a really interesting input on that, where the way I played Pygmalion was the opposite, in terms of I would heavily prioritize as much early tempo as I could, because most of Pygmalion's builds might not spike in the mid game, they spike even later in the late game, which means that every day that you win early isn't a day earlier that your run is going to end. It represents a day later that you can let your build scale when you get to that point. Which is
it's
also,
really
sure,
complicated with
course,
Pig because it
you try,
depends
yeah.
like where your like economic engine is relative to
Right.
this state of the game, and that depends
What
on how
I'm trying to say
quickly you
is
can. Yeah.
you're of course trying to win with Pig early, but you aren't gonna sacrifice all your economy to just win the early game. You need to make sure that you have the need to
So
make sure that
yeah,
you prepare some kind of way to win, right?
that's exactly
That's
the
the thing.
thing, because Pygmalion has ways to so absurdly snowball his economy in the mid game that up until then you can sacrifice everything you have for tempo and it still won't matter. The second you hit a ledger and get an upgrade on it to gold, you'll have infinite money. And I think
Okay, interesting.
it's kind of yeah, exactly. It's very interesting in that way, where on Pygmalion, sacrificing everything for tempo, at least the way I liked to play him, can be a way to make sure that you have more time to scale. Because the
I mean,
thing
you
that
could sacrifice
ended
everything for tempo
right.
on him and still lose, though. Is the issue,
Oh
right? Is
yeah,
like
for sure. But
is like you can play hard for early game and you can still just get rolled by Shark Claws on Pig. Like
but
I
a lot of
think
the time I found that, like, if you can just win at least 3 ideally of your first 6 or 7 days, you're pretty fine. But the risk of not playing for tempo at all was that I found that I could be 0-6, and then a lot of the time when I find the thing that I need, I die before it has time to come online.
yeah, for sure. I mean, it's for sure like you of course day wins are necessary, but it there's like you don't have playing for tempo or not playing for tempo is not something that it's not like an on-off switch that you flick in the beginning of the game. It's like a series of decisions you make throughout the game. It might be like playing for tempo, quote unquote, might be something just like, all right, I'm just gonna buy these lumbors. It's day 3.
Yeah.
I see silver lumbors in the shop. I'm just gonna buy these lumbors and play them for 2 days and then sell them.
Yeah.
Like that could be the totality of your quote unquote playing for tempo in the early game as Pig. It's just a little sacrifice you make in order to hopefully increase your chances of winning one of these next 2 days, and in that way better position yourself. And so like I do want to say that like tempo isn't an on off switch. It's the summation of all of the different small decisions you make throughout your days, which are, in a sense, you're always choosing between power now and power later.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just choosing between power now and less power now, in which case the choice is easy, right? You should just choose the more power. But when you're choosing between power now and power later, which is the tough decisions that exist in the game, where you draw that line, that in a sense like is your play style, and that is if you're playing for tempo or not playing for tempo. It's kind of like every single time you make that style of decision, how you fall on one side or the other, that's kind of your play style.
Yeah.
And it starts with gold skill versus income, right? But it's every decision that you make throughout the game.
It's very interesting, this topic specifically, because I was asked if I would be interested in creating some YouTube videos by Sixten, and we were having a chat while I was streaming. And one of the topics that I've been mulling over, very, very much a macro, micro, and I think I would advise anybody that plays this game or card game in general to be a macro, micro. Like, has to be very interchangeable for you to be successful in this game. Everything that we're talking about here makes it the theme that keeps coming back to me is draft signals, and it's for people that are not familiar with what draft signals are. From this is more a card gaming experience, specifically Magic, where it's reading the room or reading your board or reading your pool and knowing when to switch. And I think playing for tempo is definitely not like you're always doing it or you're always not doing it. You have to know when, like based on what you're being presented, based on even sometimes when you get that like sort of preview of your opponent, where like what day they're on, how many wins they have. You're normally going to have an idea, and then you can even have stuff in your stash that you can slot in because of the likelihood of what you know you're going to run into. So I think at a
that's
higher
a fair
level,
point. Like knee brace is like, or like memory card. Like, am I greeting memory card? Like that's a tempo decision, right?
Absolutely.
Because you're potentially sacrificing win rate for this day for advantage later. So yeah, there's a lot of ways you can frame all these actions as tempo.
Pulse rifle for Julie is a good example.
I think one of the best examples of exactly what you were talking about on Vanessa is whether or not you have keg and whether or not you have keg enabled, because that will typically completely alter the way that I make my decisions within a day. Where if I have a keg and I have a setup skill for the keg, I might start doing things like passing over relax or temp boosts to go to shops that might just have the final pieces for that board, because I know if I put that together, I can still win on day 15 or what have you. Whereas even in the games where like you might have heated shells, but you don't have the keg, I'm gonna make the opposite play of making sure I click every temp boost and every relax just to make sure that I can hold on for as long as possible to maybe find the keg at the very end of it before I run out of all of my prestige. So I think it's like reading the temperature of the room. That was an excellent way of putting it, because so much of it is just filling out like, how is this particular run going? What do I need here and now in order to keep my intended trajectory?
Yeah, I would go as far as saying that we often throw around the term skill expression.
Yeah.
And skill expression, I think, is one of those things that the obvious one is like how you are setting up your board and the placement of your items and the rationale behind it. But skill expression is also based on what you know you're going for. Like you mentioned earlier, your mid-game tempo, right? And I don't think, like, I don't know how many people think about this, but these are topics that, like, rattle around in my brain like pretty much all the time. And skill expression more from we'll say it's a non-visible, or it doesn't have as much like actual substance to it, really comes into play. So reading room, like gauging the way things are going, even just that preview when you hover over your opponent and kind of seeing where they're at, you can kind of get a read. And that's where I like to say, that's where we'll call it the poker side of things comes into it. It's calling the bluff, or making a mathematically informed decision based on where you're sitting at the table, right? And knowing what the potential odds are of like either you hitting or you getting rolled over.
Yeah, I think that actually like put some like what you just said about it being like poker is like it kind of, one of the things I actually like about playing skill start slash playing in a way where like I need to 10-0 or 10-1 is that like the feeling of being, like, to use the poker terminology, under the gun is like is in a way like clarifying to your play in that
Correct.
For sure I need to play for today, and in that way it makes your decisions easier. And I think that like that is a really just clarifying is just the word that keeps coming to mind, is that like it makes it so that I know what my goal is, and I know like what the steps are to accomplish that goal. And then the like skill expression part of it comes in when you encounter something that like changes the equation. You know what I mean? Like, because even if you're playing perfectly tempo style, or the most tempo style you possibly could imagine or whatever, there's still some item that appears in the shop or something that appears in Pearls where it is correct to switch, or it is correct to change up and like go for something different. Like, you 100% will encounter a situation where it's going to be correct to lose tempo or sack your next day, or however you want to characterize it, jeopardize your ability to win the upcoming PvP in order to take something that's being offered for you inside the node portion of the day. And being able to identify that is like, that to me is like a form of skill expression, or maybe even the main form of skill expression in the game.
Yeah.
Could
Like,
I just add my 2 cents to what Walter was saying here? So I think Walter is absolutely correctly identifying that essentially both gold skill start as well as enchanted item, and also back in the monitor lizard meta, clicking companion core itself early game, that is the earliest form of direction in the game. A gold skill start effectively gives you direction. If you click plus 40 damage, you're now looking for weapons. If you click extra burn, you're looking for burn. If you get an enchanted item that is a builder on item, you're now playing for that item. And if you click companion core, you're now looking for monitor lizard. So having direction on node 1 is inherently powerful, right? It gives you a goal and a reward. You have your payoff, and now you just need to find the the payoff item, so to speak, which is, I think, very useful. And that is why I've in the past been a big fan of gold skills, because income is a lot more abstract in a lot of metas. Like it's sometimes hard to translate income into concrete payoff. I don't think this current meta is currently on Vanessa. Income is power in practice because, as Metal has mentioned before, not only are the items powerful, their upgrades are also super powerful. So it's like double dipping there in power. And finally, and this kind of brings us into state of the meta, I just want to say that I think a meta where tempo is incentivized and meaningful and important, I think, is a sign of a healthy meta, because it kind of inherently means that you are evenly matched on the day, and so you're doing these intentional plays to try and get an edge in a matchup. Whereas in a super polarized meta, where matches are and maybe you have like a 80-20 split, there is almost no point in playing for tempo, because the matchups are so one-sided, right? So I think that is currently, and this is something I've discussed with Metal, we both kind of agree that day one currently is kind of imbalanced, because there is you don't play for tempo on day one, because due to the fact that gold skill start and enchanted item start gives you such an insane advantage on day one. If you click income, it doesn't matter if you click like I don't know, there isn't like a temp boost on day one, but let's pretend for the sake of argument that you would sometimes click
Yeah, you
tempo
get like
day one.
fins maybe is kind of like a day one temp boost.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call
Which
it
node?
yeah,
Which
yeah,
interestingly
fin is kind
enough,
of like
you can
tempo, I
tell.
guess.
No, this one,
what I just
I
want
would
to say
love
is
to
okay.
hear your input on this one, because there is basically a temp boost on day one that I don't think any of you have been thinking about, which I've started pressing during my last 2 runs on stream and actually found huge success with. I go to ruins to click 3 regen.
Oh, I've done that as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I am. Yeah, regen is so. Yes,
It's weighing it out.
Well, that's why I said
So
fins.
the thing with
like,
the
yeah.
regen
Yeah.
is that it also helps you win row scrap. Like I
Mhm.
agree with you in a sense, but my point
But
is,
it also like
I
falls
think
off really
yeah,
steeply as early as like day 5 or 6.
that
I'd
is also
say.
fair.
So
What
there
I just want
are
to say is, I
some,
think
yeah.
my point is that I think most they like in general the state of the meta is with like on a macro level. I think this is a fairly healthy meta. It's fun to play Vanessa, for example. I think it's fun to play Mac, and Progger is having fun on Dooley, and of course people are enjoying Pig. Of course, there are some outliers. Like on a micro level, I think bees are busted, and like there are always
Yeah, all my
specific
homies
items that
hate
are too
bees.
strong.
You're in good company.
But
Don't worry.
my
I
point
haven't
is
met anybody who likes them.
the only like generic thing I think they need to work on like a macro level is I do think day one is way too polarizing between.
Yeah. So
Just
the thing that always, I think Walter had such a great analogy with comparing it to Ignite in League of Legends, because I've been there. It's exactly the same feeling.
okay, for a non-League of Legends player, can you explain what that even is?
So Ignite is in League of Legends you pick 2 summoner spells, and for most of the history of the game, one of them has basically been fixed. So you basically get to pick 1 summoner spell. And especially for a lot of the game in the top lane, the choice has been between the summoner spells Ignite or Teleport. Where Teleport is something that lets you freely move around the map once every 300 seconds, which is incredibly powerful in terms of just going back to your base, buying items, and then going somewhere, or to be able to join fights across the map. Whereas Ignite sets your lane opponent on fire. And it means that a lot of the time, if one player went for this hugely powerful mid-late game tool, and the other player went for the thing that says, I kill you in lane, but this is largely relevant in the later portions of the game, it can create a very polarized laning phase.
Yeah, a big imbalance. It creates a big imbalance in the lane. Either the Ignite side wins really hard and is at a huge advantage, or the Teleport side doesn't die and is at a huge advantage. And
But
the result is polarized.
Right, and this is where it gets a little bit frustrating if you translate this to the Bazaar. Because that's the thing, in League of Legends, it was your lane opponent who'd made the other side of that decision, which will influence the rest of the game that you are currently in. But in the Bazaar, just because you got someone with a skill start early doesn't mean that you can still just queue into the income start player in the mid game. And so it feels like I had a game recently, right? Where all I did on day one on Vanessa, because I had pretty terrible luck, is I picked 5 regen, I had a base katana, and a star chart. That was it. I dealt 5 damage every 1.9 seconds or something, 1.8 seconds. It was horrendous. I won my day one. And if that happens, you just have like a complete free run, because now you get to leverage the entire advantage of having income without being punished at the stage of the game where you should probably have been punished. And the main frustration, I think, is regardless of which side you picked, and honestly, it's especially frustrating if you pick skill start and still lose day one. But it's that fact of like, at the end of the day, it largely came down to my day one matchup RNG had a huge ripple effect on the entire outcome of my run.
It's
So
true,
if
but
I could
that's
use
also what creates different runs. So what I'll say is that like one thing that's important is that if you could just take a reliable option and get the same thing every single time, and that was a winning strategy, then you probably would just do that all the time. It's important that some variance inducing options like skill start or especially enchanted item start are at least competitive enough that people click them, because
Yeah.
if they're not, then every single game will look the same, and I think that that's actually a much worse outcome than the feel bad of like I lost with, because like yeah, it sucks, it absolutely sucks to lose day one with skill start. My rule of thumb is I don't get mad if my opponent also is skill start. Then it's just then that's fine, right? Like
Better
that.
skill one.
Yeah, yeah. Then it's like fine, but it's like if you when you lose to
Just
like
silver
toxic seaweed or
grenade,
something
yeah.
with skill start, oh my god, it's actually infuriating. But that's okay. Like I think that it's good. Like low rolls are they're good in the sense that they create a varied game experience in the same way that like in Magic, mana screw is good. Like it creates there's no comeback without adversity, and there like you need the ability to get unlucky and get screwed in order for you to achieve redemption from that fate.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think for me, the main thing is like, I hate mana screw, but I usually don't mind draw RNG. So it's the same thing, right? Where like for me, a lot of the thing that creates the most fun diversity in Bazaar is the nature of the shops and the way the game plays, where it's built to not be possible for me to repeat the same run endlessly. And I think the things that it's mainly just the fact that those first few starts, a lot of the time it truly does feel like it was just RNG.
I mean, maybe the
Like, did I get
solution is
lucky or
like to
not?
not have PvP on day one. Like like
Yes.
something
Can
Yeah.
I
like some
just chime in here? So
yeah.
I think the problem with the logic in defense of day one being alright is that it's okay that the gold skill enjoyer can win day one, because the income enjoyer is expected to win against the gold skill enjoyer on day 14. The problem with that logic is that the gold skill start should be expected to, like if they play for tempo, for example, they won't be on day 14 because they will already have won
Yeah.
the game. Whereas you're already like with income start, you lose day one, now you're on the back foot. It's far easier in the Bazaar to win early than to win late. Like it's much easier to go 10-0 than to go 10-5. If that, like, not on pig, but like that is a joke we always make. Like 10-0s are the easiest Bazaar games because
Yeah.
you're just winning,
Yeah,
winning, winning.
they're the games where your board is the worst at the end of
But
the
I
game.
will
That
say, I do think
counterintuitive, but yes.
it is a huge advantage to the Bazaar specifically compared to some other auto battlers that I have played. The fact that you still get 6 nodes before the first PvP means that there's a lot of agency. But I think a decent bit of the frustration might come from those of us who are used to back when it was a really like it was such a struggle, right? Because on one hand, there was a problem where making sure that you hit level 2 on day 1 was way too disproportionately powerful, but at the same time it was always something that felt really good to be able to go for, because it made you as the player feel like you had a lot of agency in terms of when you get to that first PvP fight, you have had the option to meaningfully influence your odds of winning or losing it. And
I just
yeah, I
want
don't
to
know.
say I am complete, like the variance I am completely fine with on day 1 is one person, for example, opt to click 5 region to win day 1. I'm completely fine with that. I'm fine with one person high rolling, finding good items. That's fine. I'm fine with losing day 1. Like that is cool, but I want it to be we both went to 6 nodes. We had like equal how should I put it? We have equal opportunities to see Finn, and it's not like my decision at the start of the game, like which star I go with, is just single-handedly, effectively deciding they want where it's like it's a non like you're just gonna win unless you lower your skill like super hard. You're just gonna win based on your skill. You can
To
have
be
a
fair,
piece
I
of
wouldn't even say that. I don't think it is necessarily to that degree, especially I have tried playing Vanessa with skill start on the current patch, and I will say that a lot of the time, if you have a red skill and you just don't find a good weapon,
yeah,
you can
sure.
still be
There's
pretty
variance there,
screwed.
but I think just in general, I would prefer if because they won, and I've said it before. And Walter said it like I maybe even mentioned it like early in the pod, like months ago at this point, that I think I wouldn't mind if the day 1 PvP simply either didn't exist or it didn't count as a win or a loss. Just we can have it there. It can just I don't
Yeah,
know, like
honestly,
just
I think that
delay
was
it until
a
day 2.
pretty interesting suggestion by Walter to have maybe like the very first PvP be something scripted. Because I will say, I
Yes,
actually, right now, I love the way Rogue Scrapper feels. The fact that it's this
agree.
predetermined fight that's on, what, node 8 or something, throughout the game. Well, is it day 2, node 2, or whatever? It doesn't really matter.
Node 3, yeah, it would
Node
technically
3,
Node
yeah.
9 or something, yeah.
Yep.
The main thing that I love is the fact that I know that that's coming up, and I've made a bunch of choices where, honestly, on Vanessa, sometimes you've just made decisions that means that you don't beat Rogue Scrapper, and you have to go for, like, Mosquito or something. But even then, I can't be too upset about it, because I had enough time to make enough decisions that I feel like it was my choices that led to that outcome. And it feels really skill testing and satisfying to just gauge how good are you at assembling the minimum necessary resources to be able to beat this specific fight that you know is coming up.
Completely
agree.
agree.
Yep.
I would say you could even make like this would be a bit weird, but the reason day 1 also felt a bit less polarizing in the past was because we used to be able to get to level 2, as Metal mentioned, which meant we had like a larger board. So I think, and we also had more health, right? So
Right.
if they somehow make it so that we just, I don't know how it would work in practice, but if you, it would be very unclean, but just this wouldn't work. Just as a hypothetical, if we had 8 nodes on day 1 so that we level, I think day 1 would feel so much better. But of course, that wouldn't be great from a game design standpoint. Just my point is that only like 2 more nodes would already
I
significantly
mean,
increase
either
the
that
agency.
or honestly, they straight up could make the starting bag space just too larger. To
Yeah,
make it
that's
so that
also
you can
sure.
play a more, or honestly, like, no, I do agree. I would love to be able to level up, because I think the fact that your day one health pool is so incredibly low contributes a lot. Because, for example, on
Yes.
Mac, if you ever get crit by a silver grenade, that is just it. Like, I think it's only Finn, or maybe like if you find the right option for 3 bronze chocolates, technically you might be able to live. But since he has 200 health, no way of leveling up, it just means that there are a lot of outcomes where on day one PvP, you just die. Like, there's no input, no
Yep.
counterplay. You had too little health to be allowed agency in the fight.
So,
I like
Progger, do you have
the-
any suggestions
Yeah.
here yourself?
Not so much suggestions. I like the due to the constraints, and this may be contrary to what we were saying in terms of day one. I find a lot of excitement comes out of trying to assemble, even though it's we'll call it suboptimal. Assemble that board you know that can get through Rogue Scrapper.
Yeah, it's so fun.
It's dealing, and this also lends to my personality, like dealing with what you've been dealt, like in drafting, where you make the best of a situation, and when you hit, it feels so like from an emotional standpoint, very, very rewarding.
And don't take me as any kind of early game hater. I think day 2, day 3, day 4 can a lot of the time be so fun. Like when you're just getting, you have had enough time to get some meaningful items, but you're still getting down and dirty in terms of like scrapping it out with like a life preserver and a jellyfish or something. Those fights are so much fun.
I paused my run before we started recording, but I'll send you what I was left on, and this will actually give you a very good idea of working with what you got.
To sit on the screen as well. Here, we got it. Yeah, honestly, I will say, goddamn, like Dooley is so scary on like day 2, day 3 nowadays. Like, I'm way, way, way more scared of Dooley than I am of early game Vanessa, because Vanessa can be weirdly fragile towards defenses. So if I've been building up, like if I have Life Preserver or Seashell or something, the vast majority of red Vanessa boards are beatable. But weaponized core or just drill in general on those early days, it can beat you down so harshly. That's definitely what I
And drill is our
lose the
worst
most
item
to.
on this board right now.
Yeah.
It's because it has nothing feeding into it. It's just eventually going off.
I mean, you have the quintessential tempo card, right? Like pulse rifle is like the most dually tempo card, like where it's like exactly like a overstated item in a way that like falls off, takes up a lot of like it has all of the late game downsides and all of the early game upsides. And
it's carried me into the late game several times.
For sure. It's definitely
particularly fond of the obsidian enchant on pulse rifle.
I've never really.
It's the 10-0 card. It's like a card that goes on your 10-0 board.
I just want to point out too, I've never like really looked in detail at the art for weaponized core, but the closer I look at it, the more I realize that you can actually see a lot of duelist weapons.
It's got a plasma
art.
rifle on it, and
it's got the
rocket launcher.
What's the
he has stolen
the
slingshot from Mac.
Laser
I know.
Yeah,
he's got Gatling gun from the what's his face, the PvE
Arcan
from Stell.
Yeah,
no, that's a Stell item, right?
Oh yeah, I think it is. Yeah, and these are plasma grenades as well down in the bottom. That's also it's a dually item. Yeah, it's flashbang style.
There's the plasma grenades to the left.
The Gatling gun is
I'll
a Stell
check
item,
real quick.
The
It
neat
is
thing
a stealth item. You are correct. Gatling gun.
I really like. Oh, you've. I'm glad you brought up the art, because when I'm streaming, I often go gaga about the
Yeah.
art in this
Game looks
game,
so damn
and
good.
I loved when the episode that you guys did a while back, and you were all like unanimously like floored by the bug art,
Oh,
and
the bug
especially
art. It's like they're
the
so
context
cute.
of how not only are they cute, not only do they form into Dualtron, but the
line that goes through
the
their
line,
artwork,
and
yeah.
it visually presents the way that is its optimal setup. Now we all know that Aiden instead of yellow is better, but that's neither here nor there. But there's so many little things in the art that you can see, like even the main page. You can see all these like you can see Sexten, you can see JJ off on the side, and there's all the art tie-ins are beautiful.
Mm-hmm. I did also have another specific thing that I wanted to bring up about the meta right now, and kind of why I've been playing so much Vanessa, and why I really like the design of shot glasses. And it boils down to effectively cards that are either divergent or convergent, where I've found that a lot of like the things that can make me feel bored with a character is, for example, Femur is a great example of a very convergent card where having Femur in your build shapes the rest of your build to adapt to the Femur. But right now, shot glasses is probably it's up there for like top 5 Vanessa strongest items at least. We have like shot glasses, SOAR Sid, holsters, Clamor and Keg or something like that. But both, honestly, and Keg too. Keg and shot glasses can be really divergent cards because the things that work with them are so broad. If you run shot glasses on like a saloon pufferfish board, it's gonna look vastly different from if you run shot glasses on like a proboscis, more like good stuff kind of board, which in turn will also look a lot of the time very different from if you're running something like a Obsidian Arbalist one-shot kill board. And I love when the strong cards for any given character are divergent in that way, because it makes me feel like I can center my playstyle really heavily around this shot glasses playstyle, but I still won't be stuck just playing the same run over and over again.
Yeah, shot glasses speaks many languages, I would say. He's fluent in all kinds of builds.
Thematically, it's like I think what they're trying to tell us at Tempo is any time is a good time for a shot.
That's definitely the lesson to be learned here. Moral of the story.
Sorry, I'm always looking for weird jokes.
Yeah,
I tried so hard to find a joke because one of my favorite jokes of all time that I tell my kids and friends, and they always sigh, is, "What do you call two crows?" And the answer is attempted murder. And
yes.
I wanted to use that with the covetous ravens, but it doesn't work or translate very well because a group of ravens is actually an unkindness. So I don't know. I don't know how to make, or that's what we call it here in Canada.
I don't actually know, Sixten, if that's a joke that translates very easily, but a group of crows in English is called a murder of crows, but two doesn't qualify as a group. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very cheesy, I know, but
I love puns like that.
No, it's a good joke. But yeah, I agree with Metal. I think my favorite items are the ones that talk a lot. I've spoken about this on length, and that's why I love, for example, First Aiden. He slots into a lot of builds. He is very versatile. I love fiber optics, which admittedly, so fiber optics is currently used with drill. But the thing I love about fiber optics is that you can use. I have used fiber optics on so many items, like Astia, charged item. So I just love those items that can do so much, yet they're so they're so both shot classes and fiber optics are so elegant in their design. It's not
And
like a
I will
500
say,
page
even
manifesto.
right now, it's not as apparent, but Metronome has a very similarly clean design where I think a lot
Yes.
of the
Yeah.
items that work with haste, like drill, thermal lance, or ballista, they end up playing out in vastly different ways in terms of how you want to construct a board around them.
Mhm. I would agree. The strength of being so broad in purpose
Mm.
is a great design piece, I find, and I love that. Now, can't speak to Vanessa. I can speak to getting beaten down by shot glasses, but and also winning against them. But shot glasses, phenomenal design, and thematically, I love the simultaneous haste and slow.
I'm trying to
Yeah.
think what Max most like talkative, or what did you call it, divergent?
Yeah,
Metal,
divergence. I
or what?
think
Yeah.
library can be very divergent. The main issue with it currently is the fact that it comes into play so late,
Late,
so
yeah.
you don't see
Yeah,
it as
it's
often.
hard to get the items that are good with it through the early part of the game and have like a
But
something to do with the library when you get it, unless you you go
I
femur.
kind of I almost want them to like retune Moose because Moose used
Hmm.
to feel incredibly divergent, and it still is to an extent. But lately, most of the time when I've been losing to Moose it's just because they have Moose and a crit potion, and then they hit me for 800 damage on like day
Yeah.
3, and then I just die. And that isn't very fun. But before, I've played a lot of Mustaf Proboscis is like I think the cool DIY version of Femur. I love playing Mustaf Proboscis. Or I've played Mustaf Flamethrower previously. That was really fun
Ooh,
too. Um, it's just a lot of stuff like that. Mustaf can be used with anything that can benefit from damage. So
flamethrower is
that's a
my
good, fun, divergent one.
flamethrower is my white whale right now. I
Yeah,
have
chasing
yet
Melon.
to have that perfect 10-0 or even just a 10 win with flamethrower, but
I
I'll get
think
it.
like the biggest thing it speaks to almost is how much more fun and healthy things usually feel, at least in my opinion, when more strength lies with the enabler rather than the payoff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very good point. Very good point.
Because at the end of the day, that just means that there's a wide variety of payoffs that you can play something with. But when the payoff dictates the build, typically the range of enablers for a given distinct payoff card, like Femur, or I would almost consider like Crow's Nest a payoff card, because Crow's Nest is the payoff for only playing one weapon.
Mhm.
It means that if the criteria is you have to play only one weapon, that's pretty limiting. Library doesn't even prohibit you from playing weapons. It like a lot
Uh,
of the time,
I've
It's
seen it.
actually good with some weapons.
yeah,
Like
Oh
it's
yeah.
good with a
that's the
lot of
other thing about it
weapons.
is that like if your weapons are long cooldown anyway, then it might not be a big deal. Or if you have charging, like with Femur, then it's not really a big deal. I played
Mhm.
library a
Library.
bunch with Plague Glaive and
Oh, Plague Glaive. Oh my gosh, what a great item. Oh my gosh.
yeah.
Yeah, I've had
I
some
mean,
good
library
runs.
is like a super fun card. It's like the pieces around it, especially like scales, pendulum. It's not like that these are weak cards. It's that what is your pathway through the like first 6 days of the game where you can end up buying cards like scales and pendulum and have them be good. The answer it used to be like I was stacking a calcinator or a retort and playing them in play, and that is not really strong enough to win you the days anymore. So that I think that that's the challenge that Mac has. It used to be, you know, before the hotfix, right? You would stack calcinator or retort, and then you could easily pivot those into something with library, something with pendulum, something charging combo-y, like a non-weapon combo board. And those cards have lost so much power, and Vat of Acid also. I guess I should throw that in, even though it's probably going to be a weapon in most cases. It's the same type of card in that it's like a big poison or burn applicator that you want to like be the centerpiece of your board, and then you want to use Pendulum to charge it with like a fast item, and or give it haste at start of combat. Basically, something to get this thing to hit really quickly and hopefully crit and have multicast and whatever. And all of that, the power of those builds has been evaporated in the mid game. You do not stand a chance to get a Shark Claws if you are packing Calcinator on your board on day 6 or day 7 or whatever. Like you're just getting eaten alive. So I think that part of his kit needs to be kind of put back. I would like to see them slightly unnerf either the scaling or the cost of Calcinator and Retort. Either make them cost two per day or something, or move the scaling number back in between what it was and what it is now. And either of those two things, I think, would help you get into a non-weapon Mac build a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
No, I
I think
agree.
You want to do board of the week?
Meta is healthy.
Yeah, I do think meta is healthy. We're in a little bit of a lull because, of course, we know
Nerf
that
bees, like bees are so disgusting. We don't actually have to talk about it.
Yeah.
They're actually disgusting. They're just it's just DJ Robot all over again.
Yep.
You buy a medium item on day 3 and you get 10 wins. It's
Yeah.
unbelievably stupid.
It's definitely top of my wish list for things that I hope they change in the big patch coming this Wednesday. For anyone who doesn't know, the season rollover is this coming Wednesday, and we have confirmation that it'll be a very large patch, as well as that the new pass will contain a Mac expansion and a Pygmalion expansion. So you can look forward to that. I'm sure we'll have a ton to talk about on the next week's episode of the podcast. But Progger has provided us with this board of the week. It's a bit of a Dualtron mishmash, but why don't you run us through it?
So this, if memory serves me, I streamed it, but I'd have to go back. But it was it started off pretty rough. I did not think we were going to get to 4 wins, and through some creative maneuvering, I was able to find a relatively early bulldozer and upgrade him quickly through a shop. And I was dealing with Gold Bill for a while. He had a drill and a drill and another bug that were on for the time being before we hit a diamond Dualtron. And on the level 10 enchant, I went rando with the painter, and we got the shiny, which kind of set us up for the magic. The only mistake I think I really made on this board was I opted to keep Catfish instead of Bomb Squad. Bomb Squad would have been triggers, so it would have been a little bit faster, but the big numbers was great. I can never remember the name of the skill, but the one beside big numbers that when you hit.
Oh, is it like double down?
Yeah. So when you hit 50% of your health pool, it will trigger your leftmost weapon. And
Oh, isn't it the one that doubles the damage of your leftmost weapon?
Or sorry, yes, doubles the damage. Yes,
Yeah.
my bad. Also, look, a bit of a shout out to distributed systems skill. Really enjoy that. And then obviously we got lucky with Banana Bowl, and we got the Overheal Haste, which is great for start of game. And we had a few other. The Petrifying Gaze and Shatter helped. Yeah,
Yeah, I will
it went
say
from 0 to hero. We'll say.
I think I didn't expect this to be the case, but I think that now that the dust has settled and everything is said and done, um, Dualtron to me is the standout like best designed card of that batch because it feels
Agreed.
like it's a really powerful card that's still sort of fair, offers a very specific, unique playstyle, and to top it all off, will still have very interesting interactions with future cards released, both the ones that care about you having large stuff and other friends. So I think that's going to be a
Yep.
really cool just staple to have exist in the periphery of Dooley. And I think overall, if the character had more cards that felt like that, if we went back to like Railgun feeling like that, and if we just get more, and I don't mean that they have to be large or specific build arounds, but right now we do have Dualtron, we do have Drill, if we could have railgun as well and combat core as well, and then just cyber security and just a more diverse spread of payoffs or carry items that feel like they actually get the whole way to 10, I would love to go back to playing some Dooley again.
Can I just say that this run is like some runs are just like they're more about the journey than the destination, right? And the
Yeah.
format and
100%.
and the format of like the standard convention for this game is that we all post screenshots of this victory screen of 10 wins gold victory is really like that isn't most of the game. Like the it's there's definitely like something lost, like most of the decisions you make in the game really have nothing to do with what your end game screen is going to look like. Like they're
100%.
really more about what all the boards you played on all the other days of the game, what they look like, and like you can have an inspired run that ends up looking like the most plain Jane board that at the end, and you could have still made an amazing play, an amazing pivot in the interim in the middle part of the game that will not be reflected on your final board. So I just want to say that like I appreciate you know at least giving us some narrative as to why you picked this one, because like obviously yeah, like there's more to the game than like the final board screenshot. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah,
I
no,
think that's important
it
to bring
lends
up.
itself to the thing that I absolutely revel in the game, where you you think based on the signals you're receiving that you're supposed to go cybersec, right? And then you you start reading things, or you're just not hitting what you need for that build, and fighting your inclinations or fighting your tendencies to move away. Like, I think one of the scariest things for, I would say, most players is when you have to do like a full board stash sell, right? To move in like that major pivot. But when it pays off, it you end up like this. Now, I will say there was one individual who did offer some insight. The reason I failed to see it, because if you watch any of my streams, sometimes I'm a little quick with the click, and I forget something. Like the one that I still kick myself for is that I put Obsidian on cybersecurity versus printer, and I should have put it on printer because I already had gold arc rays, or whatever they're called. Is it arc ray? Arc blasters.
Blaster,
Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that would have put me to 10, but I ended up going 9, right? Still a decent run with cybersec, but not where I wanted to end up.
I think the worst feeling in the world is when you're too tired and you hit your enchant and you get obsidian and you see obsidian is amazing on like my dive weights or some crap, and you just slam it, and then you go, wait a second, didn't I have a keg in my stash? And then you cry yourself to sleep that night.
Yeah, we all
Definitely
have
has
those moments.
never happened to me, but
No, you're talking about other people for
yeah.
sure.
Also, keg and multicast don't agree with each other. Fair warning. You better hope your
Nope.
keg is radiant or you're gonna have a bad time. Thankfully,
Yeah.
though, shiny just does the same thing as obsidian, so yeah.
And then it's gone.
Yeah. Well, I think that about does it, honestly. It's been a little bit of a lull, but of course, I think there's going to be a ton of exciting stuff coming in just a few days. So
Hmm.
I'm personally like just kind of coasting it out a bit, enjoying some silliness with proboscis and stuff like that to save up some energy for just going crazy when they drop everything. I'm the most excited for the fact that when Tempo promises that we're getting a big patch, usually that means we're getting a big patch. So
We
I'm
can pour
almost
Yeah,
over
they
the
definitely
notes.
are unafraid to change a lot of
yeah,
stuff.
I'm
So
almost
I
like
assume it's going to be a big deal.
more excited about the patch than I am about the cards, Loki.
Yeah, I
But
would
it's
agree.
a lot to look forward to. But in the meantime, for people who want to see more of you, Progger, where can they find you?
Best way to find me, I'm still working out what my schedule is going to be, but I'm usually doing like a couple times per week and then sometimes a bonus stream on the weekend depending on what the family plans are. But you can find me at twitch.tv /ProggerPlays. And Progger is typically what I go by, but I just thought the alliterative with
What time of day do you want to give a time frame for when you stream usually?
yeah, typically like between 6 and 7, like weekdays between 6 and 7 Eastern Standard Time is when I stream. I usually have a good solid group of people there. There's a good mix. I want to give a shout out to Kurt the non-gamer, who is
Kurt the
profusely
non-gamer
out.
is a legend.
We know Kurt the non-gamer.
We love Kurt.
He's in some chats. With
Yeah,
He's in every
he
chat.
gets
Kurt
around,
gets
and
around, yeah.
he the thing I find most endearing about him is every single time he's always apologetic for, thanks for putting up with my questions. I'm like, no, this is the whole point
Yeah,
of,
that's
like
very
we
much
want to talk. We
yeah.
want to talk. This is why we do it. So
He's
Yeah,
also
he's an exemplary viewer.
He's
yeah, I love
so
him.
verbose in like the perfect way where anytime you read a message, you don't even need to see the name. You know it's a Kurt message. And
Yes,
it's great.
he gives you a good chunk of text to like actually
Yeah,
read
yeah,
through, and
yeah.
it's one of my favorite things during stream. Like the main reason I stream is yeah, sure, I love games, but building community, meeting new people. I've been lucky enough to meet all of you. It's been a huge shout out to like the Bazaar community as a whole.
Yeah.
It's just it's a really good spot to be. So
It's so fun
yeah.
too. Like I love chatters with like unique character traits where it's like
Yeah.
yeah. Whenever you just
It's
go like that's one individual to be certain, it really livens up the space, brightens up the room. That's why we do it at the end of the day, connecting
That's how I
with
felt
people
about
and having a
Solus.
good time. Solus is
That's
great too.
that's
Yeah,
the reason I'm connected with you guys
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
he popped in randomly just to say hi and then dropped a sub like alarmingly, and I was like, oh my goodness gracious, and then we
he
hit it
comes
off.
in like a storm.
Yeah, and I love that.
Yeah,
Like it's
you gotta bring
community
the
first.
energy. Oh.
So yeah, Twitch TV slash Progger Plays. I'm always happy to just chit chat. I love talking about non-game stuff.
Yeah.
I'm always happy to, the dogs sometimes come on to stream and say hello. I've got 2 little ones, and yeah, I'm always here when I am, and I'm chat about whatever you want to talk about.
Well, that's awesome. And what about you, Walter?
Well, you can find me trying to keep up with Kurt the non-gamer in everyone's chat. But yeah, I'm on everyone's various discords, and I'm usually hanging out in in maybe Metal's chat or Sixten's, or maybe I'll start. I usually don't. I'm usually kind of busy around the time you stream, but maybe I'll try. I'm gonna try to make an effort to check out your stream as well, Progger.
No worries.
But yeah, if you see me in chats, say hello, say you heard the podcast. I appreciate hearing from everyone.
And what about you, Sixten?
Yeah, you can find me at twitch.tv/2Sixten. I also have a YouTube channel, 2Sixten, and I have a Discord server. I haven't been streaming this week, but I hope to be back as usual with the new patch. Especially if we get some dually changes. I'm so pumped to play more dually again. It's been way too long.
He's so at the cusp of just. I'm excited, honestly. I want to say they're gonna nail it.
I'm also gonna make a prediction. I think rigged will finally be gone from Aetheryte, or they will make Aetheryte completely unbeatable. One of the two.
I believe that we have received explicit dev confirmation that they are changing rigged and rusty, and that it's due to like workflow pipelines and just crunch that they haven't. The change hasn't
but you mean we're getting them changed this week or just in the future?
No, so I don't know this week for sure, but since they've confirmed that the intention is to change them, and we know that there's a massive patch, I wouldn't be too surprised if when we put 2 and 2 together.
All right, nice. Yeah, well, with that context in mind, I'm gonna bet even more money on this. Now I'm all in here. So anyway. What about you, Metal? Where can people find you?
So I also stream on twitch.tv/MetallFenix with 2 L's and an F, same name as you see on the screen. And I've got a YouTube channel which is primarily focused on a variety of guide content. So this week I've been publishing Vanessa overviews and guides, the whole extensive like how I play her currently, which I think it's a perfect time to get in on that Vanessa action since she's really fun right now. You just coast that ship for 4 days, and then on Wednesday, crazy things will happen, and we'll figure it out from there. I'm
Choppy waters.
Yeah, excited to see what new guide.
I mean, the first couple days after the patch is always the most fun, right? You get that. Sure. I'm always stomping right after the patch comes out.
Oh shoot! I forgot one thing. I'm such a bad content creator. So by the time this episode is up, I should have there should be a video up on Sunny's channel where I try to coach him to 10 wins on Vanessa. So stay tuned for that. It was a journey and a half.
There you go.
But yeah.
Excellent.
So I'm coaching there.
Yeah. All right. And I also have a Discord. And I want to shout out, especially with the Discord, there are channels where you can post questions you have about my guides or suggestions for future guides that you'd like to see. I love finding the overlap between things I'm excited to talk about and things that people want to learn more about themselves. So if you have something that you're like, man, if someone could just explain this to me, drop the suggestions in there. I'll try to make it happen. And in the meantime, we will be back with another episode next week as well. We try to get them out on Sundays. We'll have another guest. As a reminder, you can find us both on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or via RSS feed for your podcast listening app of choice. So hopefully we'll see some more of you there. And in the meantime, wherever you are, I hope you have a wonderful morning, evening, day, or night, and until the next time.